it really turned into a really successful sales team. That, in addition to having Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, that all helped too.
It's always easier to sell tickets when the team is winning, right? I think I've heard you say that before. When you're driven, the need to accomplish a goal is relentless. Hard work and ambition compel you to do whatever's necessary. In my work as a personal injury trial lawyer for 18 years, it's common to meet driven people. Those with drive can have different personalities, careers, or backgrounds, but they possess one common factor. Despite their passions, driven people want to surround and motivate themselves with other driven people. If you want to learn how to overcome obstacles by learning from others, then tune in here. This is the Driven Crowd Podcast. Thank you for tuning into episode 26 of the Driven Crowd Podcast, fueled by Snellings Law. I'm your host, Scott Snellings. Today's guest has had an incredibly busy year. Since October, he has been helping to ensure that his team thrives, stays healthy, and puts together win after win. He is Matt Bowman, the Executive Vice President and Chief Revenue Officer for the Western Conference finalist Dallas Stars. Before coming to Frisco, Matt worked for the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Indiana Pacers. He has experience in business, marketing, sales, leadership, and all of the things that we talk about on this show, and I can't wait to dive into. And even though I am a diehard Dallas Stars fan, I promise you this will not be a hockey talk episode for the most part. Matt, welcome to the Driven Crowd.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, Matt, let's start with your history, man. Where were you born and where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, the capital of the great state of Iowa. Grew up there. I went to high school there. Played football as a kid and played a little bit of football in college at a school called Drake University for 1 year, and then ended my athletic career and transferred to the University of Iowa, where I graduated with a finance degree back in 2004.
All right. So you started off in the snow states. That's what all of us Texans think, is we hear somewhere in the Midwest and we think, sounds really, really cold. No, thank you. Yeah.
And it's weird. For some reason, we didn't play hockey up there. Most of my friends, all of us, we played, kind of your traditional football, basketball, baseball. Wrestling was big in Iowa, but I think we were just so determined to not be Minnesota that we said we kind of fully rejected hockey and we just didn't really play hockey. So interestingly, I ended up in a career in hockey, but I had never really, been exposed to the sport very much until I started working for the Stars.
Have you picked it up since? Like, will you get out there and skate a little bit?
I have 4 kids now, Scott, so I have no time to do anything. But when I was a single guy, I got to the Stars when I was 30 years old, and I was still single at the time. So, yeah, I did actually pick up some gear and played. I probably played 4 or 5 pickup games of hockey, and I know you play. It's one of those games that until you really get on the ice and give it a shot, you really can't appreciate the level of skill that these guys have and the ability to have skating ability, but also the hand-eye coordination of a baseball player or, a tennis player, but the skating ability of a figure skater. I mean, it combines so many skills that, it sure gave me a lot more respect for what these guys do. And with these ladies that are playing now too.
It's definitely humbling the first time you get out there in hockey gear and try to deflect a puck or actually just go skate across the rink and do a hard stop and try to get in position while someone is trying to hit you. Definitely a difficult
And
sport.
Stopping was the hardest part for me. Usually it meant running into the wall because stopping was hard.
Yeah, if your skates don't stop you, something else will.
When somebody throws you a puck and you're skating and you're trying to catch the puck while skating, I didn't realize how hard that is. And when you see these guys do it on the ice and they're zipping it around, it just looks like, oh, that'd be fun. It's incredibly difficult to skate and catch a puck with a stick at the same time. And then, like you said, Scott, then stopping at the end.
Right. And I guess that's what makes them truly professional is they make it look so easy.
No question. Absolutely.
All right. So growing up in Iowa, what did you have an eye towards in terms of going off to college? What did you want to do with your life?
Well, I was like most kids. I wanted to be a professional athlete, and
either an athlete or a rock star, right?
athlete or rock star, maybe some combination. I learned probably by the time I was about 12 years old that wasn't going to happen. But I always just loved sports like so many of us do. I mean, I love there's no human experience quite like it. To see people pushing their bodies to a limit, the mental aspect of pressure and drama, and watching these athletes perform under all those circumstances and succeed. It's sometimes better than watching a $100 million movie production. It's just, I just was really always drawn to the sports world. And when I realized that I wasn't going to be able to play, I started evaluating other options. I mean, how else could I get in there? Jerry Maguire was a movie that came out when I was a teenager, and I'm like, maybe that's a route for me. So I kind of explored, the idea of going to law school and being an agent. I realized I didn't like going to class. And so, go another 3 years of school didn't sound great to me, but, I ended up thankfully, and sometimes it's just, you get these fortuitous things, Scott, in your life. My uncle, Dave Gallagher he worked for the University of Iowa where I was going to school. He had developed his own sports marketing business that was affiliated with the University of Iowa. And he was selling group tickets to, women's hoops games and men's hoops games and things like that, and some football. And so he kind of showed me and basically brought me on as an intern. I was making $1,000 a month, and I lived with him in his basement. This was after I graduated. So, my first year out of school, I made like $14,000 all in. But I learned kind of how he sold tickets, and he sold like little merch trinkets and stuff like that. That experience then propelled me to have a sports experience on my resume. And I presented that to an NBA job fair in 2006, and they accepted me into the job fair. And at that job fair, I was able to go and interview with pretty much every NBA team in 2006, and got on with the Indiana Pacers.
And so what do you think your background with your uncle taught you that, someone coming out of business school or someone who didn't have that experience would have no idea about?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, the way I got into the business was it's about selling. It's about revenue generation. I mean, I never considered myself a salesman. I always had kind of a negative connotation with sales. I thought about the kind of the sleazy used car dealer, right. And I think, no disrespect to used car people, because I know a lot of great salesmen and salespeople that are doing that, but that was kind of my perception. And I never thought of myself that way. But then that honestly, I fell into it only because that's where I saw the jobs were in sports. And, these teams need people to generate revenue, and tickets are in the NHL, the number one revenue stream in our game. Other games, the NFL media rights, broadcast rights, those are the big ones. But in the NHL, tickets still remains the number one revenue driver, and teams need people to go out and promote and sell season tickets and single game tickets and groups and stuff like that. And so that was a kind of a first glimpse to me to say, okay, I've now been taught how to sell group tickets to people. I'm going to take that experience to the Indiana Pacers and say, hey, look, I've sold before. And that kind of gave me an edge over, the thousands of other kids coming out of school, basically, that wanted a job in the industry.
And so you start off with this perception of you have kids. I assume you're familiar with the movie Matilda, right? And the Danny DeVito used car salesman character, who is probably exactly what you had in mind when you said used car salesman. So you come in with kind of that picture of a salesman. What is it like? What philosophy did your uncle teach you in terms of selling these group tickets or tickets in general?
Well, what my uncle's superpower is, and what I've learned, is a lot of great revenue generators' superpower is that they can get people to like them first, right? Mm-hmm. It wasn't about, hey, here's the script that I use to convince somebody, or worse, trick somebody into buying something. It's quite the opposite. It was really about integrity and about being able to say, here, this is a solution for whatever problems you may have. You may want to be entertaining your staff, or providing incentives for your staff. And here, tickets might be a great way to reward your people for doing a great job. Or you may want to have 3 hours a night, 44 nights a year in our case for hockey, to spend with your favorite clients and just build relationships with them. Or you may want to go to games and be with your kids, and have that could be the way that you and your kids spend quality time together. Everybody's got something that they're trying to do better. And I think what we found with sales is that, if you're selling tickets can be the solve for a lot of different things. And it's just trying to help people understand this may be something for you that you've never thought about before.
All right.
My uncle was really good at that.
And so how did you take that and go, big time, right? Was this the Indiana Pacers that you got your first job with?
Yeah, and big time is a relative term, because I think I had made a $16,000 base salary, and the rest was all commission. And you may remember, Scott, this was 2006. So do you remember the brawl in Detroit, the Malice at the Palace?
I do.
So this was the year after the Malice at the Palace. So the Indiana Pacers, even within their own market, the fans had kind of turned on them. They were not happy with them. Across town, Peyton Manning was leading the Colts, and that year they ended up winning the Super Bowl. So the Colts were like the greatest thing. The Pacers had a lot of problems. There were shootings. Fights. It was a rough time to work for the Indiana Pacers, but I was just happy to be there.
Sure.
So I ended up out of 12, they brought in 12 entry-level reps at the time. And this was kind of, back in the days where they just bring in an army, and it was like sink or swim, good luck. They trained us. And my boss who was there is still one of my great mentors. Ben Milson was his name, but he trained us. But then after that, it was like, can you do it or not? And I was able to finish in the top three. I think that I was 1, 2, somewhere in there that year. But like the revenue that we generated was, I look back today and it was nothing compared to like what we're doing, now, thankfully, with the Stars. So, it wasn't like it was the big time and that it was the big pro sports team. But a lot of times your entry level sales position, I think in a lot of industries, it's kind of like you're kind of the lowest life form on earth at the company until you start to prove yourself.
So you walk into that Indiana situation where obviously you have everything going against you. How do you take that situation and find the positives to be able to go spin it to, a company to buy group tickets? Say, hey, you really got to come down here to watch some bad basketball, and at the risk of your life and getting shot, come buy tickets. Like, how do you embrace those facts and turn them into a positive?
Well, I think for one, I had to work smarter. I really struggled early. Like the first couple of months I was in Indiana, I was living in this apartment and struggled. I mean, I didn't get my first sale in like 2 months. And I did have some colleagues of mine that were selling, and I was looking over at what they were doing. And what were they doing? They were finding warmer leads. They were going around. Back then we weren't assigned leads. We just kind of had to go find them. I was basically saying, I'm going to make my mark by saying, I'm going to go call the coldest leads I can find, and I'm going to sell them. Meanwhile, my colleague was going through a list of people that had already bought single game tickets, last year. And he's like, hey, do you want to buy a 10-game plan? And he'd sell a 10-game plan, and then another one and another one. And all of a sudden he's doing all this volume. And I'm like, you're not doing that the right way. You're basically renewing people. And he's like, no, I'm just working smarter. And I'm like, he was working smarter. And so number one is working smarter, not harder. I was working way too hard. And once I kind of went over to these leads that were more, they at least had shown some affinity for the Indiana Pacers, I started to be able to find those sales. And that was really what it was about. In addition, though, some of it was it's just mental and just being able to say, I believe in myself and I'm going to find a way out of this. I do remember a time when it got really dark and I was sitting in my room, hadn't made any money. And it was just like, I'm going to have to move back to Iowa because this isn't working for me. And I just, it was dark, but what did I do? I think I just went in and talked to my boss the next day and he was great. And I just said, look, I'm struggling. I need some help. And his message was more or less, you've got it. Believe me, you can do this. You got to have that belief. And I stuck with it. And once the season kind of came around, I started finding my groove and I was able to go from 10th, 12th on the board to 1 in about 3 or 4 months.
What do you think it was about you sitting there in that dark night, knowing that this is just going terribly? I don't know if I can do this. What do you think it was that made you go talk to your boss the next day, as opposed to just saying, I can't do this. I'm done. I'm out. It's just too hard.
I think I had no other choice, Scott. The idea of going back and doing what my parents did, which was working in insurance in Iowa, God bless them for doing it. They raised us. We had a great childhood, but I'm like, I can't do that. I basically had no safety net. And I said, I'm going to make this work. I have no other choice. The alternative is not living to me. So that's what it was. It was just, I had no safety net. And I think a lot of people that really kind of go in and pursue their career they have that they want, they have that moment where it's like, I got nothing else. I have to make this work.
Yeah, so your ships had been burned. There was no going back for any other options.
The ships, the bridges, yeah, everything. There was no other option.
So you mentioned something I think incredibly important here, working smarter, not harder. How have you carried that through your career in terms of, how do you view situations and say, all right, what's the smarter way to work here? Anybody can put in a ton of hours, right? You can work 12-hour, 15-hour, 18-hour days, if you have the grit to do that, but that's not necessarily going to move you forward. So how do you approach your job today and then all the jobs leading up to today to figure out the smartest way to work?
I think what experience has given me is opportunities for people to show me what that looks like. Another one was, so I went from Indiana where we were trying to sell companies. I used that to parlay myself a new job and selling really expensive seats at the new AT&T Stadium, which was 2007. It was new back then. Again, it was a B2B sales focus. Then I went to Oklahoma City and it was a different animal, but I was still kind of using my old processes. This was the first in Oklahoma City. I got my first leadership position. So I was able to teach our salespeople how to sell, but I was bringing the Dallas Cowboys club seat mentality to Oklahoma City, which is really a B2C sale more so than it is a B2B. So I was telling all of my guys, hey, go set appointments with CEOs, go set appointments with VPs of marketing and VPs of HR in Oklahoma City and try to sell, lower bowl season seats. My boss, Brian Burns at the time, then sat me down and he's like, hold on, Bowman, this is great, but look at your sales cycle. Look at how long this takes. How many meetings do you have to have with a CEO to close 4 season seats? Meanwhile, you've got 3,000 people that bought, single game tickets. I don't care if they buy full season. Sell them packages, sell them a 5-game plan. Do it with volume. And a light bulb went off. And so the next morning I went to my crew and I said, forget about all this stuff I've taught you. We're going to switch gears. We're going to go to volume selling now. And we took our season seat base from 10,000 seats to, 12,000 seats that year by doing it, selling to consumers. And so what all of that stuff has taught me now with my marketing hat on and everything else, we have to really think about our audience and who are we trying to, who would be most interested in these products, whether it's whether it's t-shirts or ticket packages or full season memberships, who would be most interested? What does the data tell us about who is buying these things? How do we find more people that look like them and then go attack them? As opposed to opening up the phone book or putting a billboard on the tollway and saying, hey, I hope somebody sees it that's interested. Using it's that shotgun versus sniper rifle, I think, in gun terms, which would work in Texas. But, the sniper rifle being really targeted about where we're going as opposed to, just shooting stuff into the ether.
Yeah, and I know at our firm, we've been doing a lot of work over the last several years, quite frankly, to identify what we call our avatars, right? Like who is it that we're really trying to reach? Who is our ideal client, from crash type to injuries to all of those kinds of things? Who are we going to make the biggest impact for? And that has really, really helped narrow the focus on who we're really trying to reach with our marketing. So that was your first leadership position, you said, over at the Oklahoma City Thunder. What lessons did you learn there from a leadership perspective?
I've been fortunate, Scott, my whole career. I've had really unbelievable mentors, like I'm sure you have as well. And somebody, said this to me one day, and it's always stuck with me. When you're interviewing for a job, they're interviewing you, but you're also hiring your boss, right? You want to go in there with the mindset of, can I work for this individual? Do I want to be like this individual? Do I trust them? Do I respect their knowledge and their abilities? And do I want to try to grow into that? And I've always been able to do that. I've had incredible leaders that I've worked for, people that, in our business, which is pretty small. These are kind of legendary, revenue generation type folks in the sports industry. So in OKC, I think that company was as well run as any that I've worked for. Brian Burns is the head of sales and marketing there, and he was the guy who taught me about selling to consumers as opposed to selling to businesses. So I just think that company is so focused on attention to detail and, really, really thinking things through before they pull the trigger on any kind of external marketing campaign. They're just so thoughtful about everything, and they do a lot of work despite, taking extra time and making sure that they're thinking things through.
And so when you've had your first direct reports in that leadership position, how did you go about managing them through developing goals, through holding them accountable, through teaching mindset? How did you do those things?
I think as much as I'm an okay salesman, right? Like I'm above average. I think I worked really hard at it, but like a lot of times the best players aren't the best coaches.
Right.
I was kind of that. I wasn't the most talented salesperson, but I had to work really hard at it, and I had to learn the techniques and the principles, and that's the kind of stuff that I thought made me a better sales leader and manager and coach than I ever was as a salesperson myself. I used those things, that knowledge that I had to work at, and I was able to then communicate that to people. So my goal was always to hire salespeople that were far more talented than I was, but then impart what I know about selling to help them develop and get better. And so I think I was good teaching the skills, but I think I also have just kind of some God-given emotional intelligence that, or maybe it's my parents, I don't know. I've always been able to kind of understand people's emotional drives and what's driving them. Sometimes it's as simple as asking, like, what motivates you, what gets you up in the morning, and using that information to motivate has always been kind of a skill of mine, and I'm very appreciative of. And so I think in addition to teaching the skills, I also had the ability to motivate. And I kind of combined those two, and it really turned into a really successful sales team that in addition to having Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, that all helped too.
It's always easier to sell tickets when the team is winning, right? I think I've heard you say that before.
Yeah, what I say is I always get a lot smarter when the team is winning.
There you go. All right, so you take that experience from the OKC Thunder, and what's the next move? Is that to the Stars?
Yeah, it was to the Stars. So I was there in 09 to 12 in OKC. So it was just as the team was emerging. OKC Thunder started in 2008 as they left Seattle and moved to Oklahoma City. So I was there in year 2 through 4 in OKC. And that was year 4 was the year that Thunder went to the final against the Miami Heat, which would have been LeBron, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh. Ended up losing to those guys, but it was an incredibly successful run. We had 50 consecutive sellouts at the time I left. I think it ended up being something like in the hundreds. But we got into a place where we were sold out. And I was like, there's only so much more as the revenue generator that I can do here. So I was looking around for my next opportunity, and fortuitously, Brian Burns, who I mentioned before, who's the head of sales and marketing for the OKC Thunder, he started his career with the Dallas Stars in 1993. And he called, or he got a call from his friend Brad Alberts, who is the current president and CEO of the Dallas Stars and my boss, who at the time was head of corporate partnerships for the Stars. And he said, hey, we need somebody to come in and run ticket sales. The Stars had entered into bankruptcy in 2008 through 10 as a result of the financial crash, the Great Recession back then. And so the team had fallen on incredibly hard times. Tom Hicks, the old owner, had to give up the team. The league was running it at the time. Thankfully, our owner, Tom Gallardi, bought the team in 2011. He brought in Jim Lights, Brad Alberts, and then those guys brought me in 2012, long story short. And so in 2012, I started as the vice president of ticket sales and service to sit over top of all of our ticket sales group. From there in 2015, after 3 years of having some good success, I was able to absorb the marketing division. And so because tickets and marketing with our group are so intertwined, it was a logical next opportunity for me, and we were able to take tickets and marketing and merge them together. And then in 2019, when our old partnerships, our sponsorship vice president Grady Raskin left to be the president of the new XFL franchise in Arlington, I absorbed the corporate partnerships division, which is probably the second biggest revenue stream that we have, that we manage outside of media. So basically now the two largest revenue streams report up to me, and marketing to support those two streams.
All right. So you leave your ticket sales job in Oklahoma City to go over to the Stars, and you have a completely new sport, one that you've never played, not, I'm guessing, overly familiar with, and you are not just over ticket sales, but also marketing. So how do you deal with that? First off, the new sport, and then secondly, did you even have any experience in marketing? And if so, what was it, and how did you jump into that?
I am not a classically trained marketer. My 3 years when I was just in charge of ticket sales, myself and the vice president of marketing worked hand in hand on every day, on promotions to try to help sell tickets. And so I really gained my marketing experience just by working with marketing on a daily basis. But no, I was not an MBA, or I didn't go and have all the training in marketing that most marketers have. So I think, have to go in with the understanding that I don't have all the answers. In fact, I kind of, more often than not, I'm asking questions and saying, okay, here's the problem we need to solve. And go to my marketing team and I say, guys, what are the ways that we can solve this problem? Now going in this year, our problem is going to be how do we sell upper level seats? Because we're going to be getting to a point where we're going to have to cap, some of the more premium areas in our building, thankfully. How do we sell upper level seats? Who's buying up there? What are the segments? How can we make that cool? I don't know the answer. I've got ideas, but what I need to do is go to my experts in marketing and kind of present that problem and then facilitate a discussion around it, as opposed to saying, this is what we're going to do, guys. I'm in charge. It may be totally wrong. That's kind of the way I've always approached those things.
Man, I love that. We can tend to let our egos get in the way and based on our experience say, you know what, I think this is absolutely what we need to do. So y'all figure out how to do it. As opposed to going to the true experts.
Exactly. Thankfully, I don't know if it's because I'm hard-headed or what, but I have never been afraid to ask the dumb question. I will ask the dumbest question. And more often than not, I feel somebody else is also having that question, but they don't want to say it because they know it's dumb. I will ask the dumbest question. And sometimes it does make me sound dumb, but I then will find a way to say, look, okay, this is why I asked that, because let's make sure, a lot of times it's level setting. Why are we doing this again? Please tell me exactly what why did we start here? Or what are we trying to solve? Or I think so often I see business happening and strategies develop, and there's just these assumptions that are made. And I think always asking questions against what's the assumption we're making here will help you get to a better, more clear path as to what your strategy ultimately is trying to accomplish.
Man, I love that. And I think ideas can be the same way, right? Throw out your dumb ideas. When we whiteboard stuff at the firm, whether it's litigation strategies or themes or whatever, we encourage everyone, just throw it out there. We'll write it down. Maybe it's awful, maybe it's silly, maybe it's stupid, but it could lead to something really, really good, or it could connect the dots that we didn't see before. And so I think throwing those ideas out or asking the dumb questions is a super important part of being a leader.
And I don't know about you, Scott, but that's my favorite part of the job. I love the ideas of let's sit down and brainstorm. Let's sit down and just, okay, let's try to solve a problem and let's throw out ways to do it. And yeah, there's going to be some that are going to be so stupid, but you know what? That might lead us to the next thing. So I'm with you. That stuff, weirdly enough, is so fun to me.
Yeah, 100% agree. We have a whiteboard in our conference room. And I'm notorious. I would never sit down in there. I always just grab a marker and whatever we're doing, I'll typically walk up to the board and just start drawing something or writing words out. And that's my happy place. And I feel
I love
that's
a whiteboard.
Yeah.
I love a whiteboard. I should show you mine right now. I got it right here. It's crazy the stuff I have.
It helps me think better, right? When I have a whiteboard and I have something in my hand, I can just think better.
Yeah. And you're moving, right? You're moving, you're writing, you're crossing stuff off. I don't know. It gets the blood flowing and the ideas flowing a little bit better. I love it.
Yeah. So growing up in the business, it sounds like you had some really, really good mentors. How has that affected you in terms of mentoring people underneath you?
I think you take pieces of what you like from, at least I do, from all of these leaders. And I think what I am today, the way I present myself is it really is a combination of all those people that have helped mold me into who I am. And so, I think I always take the approach of, I want to be of service. I'm a big believer that if I can help everybody do their job to their max potential, that's what's going to make me successful. It's not about this group. And I've probably got 70 people that ultimately kind of report up through my 3 verticals here. I'm not the king. My boss, Brad, who is the president of the team, is the leader of the team. He doesn't operate that way. He's not the king. He is here. And that's a big piece I've taken from him is he's here to help us all do our jobs as well as we can. And if we all succeed, the business will succeed and he will have won. And I think that's the approach that we all take. So I'm really just constantly focused on how do my salespeople succeed? How do our marketers show direct return on our investment in them? that's kind of the way we do it.
So you obviously have super busy times, and then off season, I would assume, is a little bit less busy. You mentioned earlier you have 4 kiddos. How do you fit it all in?
The hardest part is during the season, you've got 44 nights where dad has to go to the arena. And, the other part is it's fun for me. So it does sometimes it's a lot of strain on my wife, who is absolutely my rock. And, we just kind of have to make a family commitment that this is what our life is. But, it's really tough on her, and it's not, it's a demanding job. It's a lot of time. And she's running around, driving kids to activities and preschool and everything else. She's an incredible expert in scheduling and logistics and operations, and she can be repairwoman. So, I mean, I couldn't do it without her, frankly. And I don't think it's a really tough business for anybody that doesn't have that kind of support at home. So all I can say is that the way it works is because she puts her head down and gets the job done every day.
You clearly love what you do. You're an ideas guy. How do you turn that off? Right. One of my big problems is I'll go home and we'll be watching a family movie together or something like that. And my mind will just be wandering back to an idea I had earlier or work or something. And then I catch the glare from the wife of, hey, come on back, join us now. How do you deal with that?
Well, that sounds a lot like my house, I'll tell you.
So not very well, like me.
Yeah, no, I wish that's something I probably could do better. I think, you try. The first thing you got to do, Scott, I'm sure you do too. Like, you just have to say, I have to put the phone away. And it's really hard, especially, even today, which June 15th, the season's over. I could get a call from a variety of people at, 7:30 at night while, we're doing dishes or something. And, you got to pick it up because it could be an emergency or, your ideas are flowing. You're like, you know what? I wish I can't wait to get in the office tomorrow because I want to put this idea on paper and I got to get it out of my head and on paper so I don't forget it.
Right.
And you have to just kind of, I don't know about you, like I shoot myself an email. And once I shoot myself an email with the idea, maybe a sentence or two, it's like, it's out of my brain. It's somewhere safe. I can relax again. That's how I do it.
Yeah. Ever since I read Getting Things Done, I've done the exact same thing. And Siri is great because I don't even have to roll over in the middle of the night and type it. I can just whisper it to Siri. And not wake anybody up. All right, so I know you have an appointment to get to. We're running low on time, so a few final questions here. Favorite books?
The one I read recently, well, not so recently, was Shoe Dog.
Yeah.
It's a great book. I love Outliers. I'm a big Malcolm Gladwell fan.
Great stuff.
Those are the first two that come to mind. I wish I could read more, honestly. Most of my reading these days is Twitter and articles. Like, I read a lot of Sports Business Journal. I read that religiously every day, which has done a great job. The Athletic, I think The Athletic is doing a really good job as far as telling not just sports stories, but sports business stories, which is where I spend a lot of my reading time, just keeping up with the industry. So I wish I could read more novels. I usually do that on planes, but other than that, daily I'm reading, a lot of sports business news.
All right. What about podcasts?
The Driven Crowd is one I'm going to be listening to here. I'm not a big podcast guy. I do listen to our Razor Ray, who is our color analyst here. Yeah. He does a podcast. On
largest vocabulary of any human being, I think, ever.
He's the best. I'm about to see him here in about an hour. We're going to be voting on our next Hall of Fame inductees, and he's a big member of our board on that. So yeah, he's the best. Great. So that's a podcast I listen to.
Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much.
I like Bill Simmons too, by the way. I listen to some Bill Simmons.
Good stuff. Good. All right, Matt, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And thank you everyone who is tuning in to the Driven Crowd. Thank you very much. We appreciate your support. And thank you to the Aussie Grind. the coffee shop of the Driven Crowd over off Preston. And we appreciate every single person listening in and the likes and the ratings. We really appreciate. So thank you very much. We'll see you next time on the Driven Crowd podcast.